Greetings and welcome back to another wristwatch video and another wristwatch review. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the legendary Seiko SKX007 dive watch. But before we switch perspectives, take a closer look at the watch. Wristwatch check. What am I wearing in today's video? Well, today I am wearing my dive watch from my collection. It is my San Martin Vintage Diver, and I already did a review of this watch. If you're interested, the link is in the description of this video. Now, let's take a closer look at the Seiko SKX and come back here, talk about the pros and cons and some more thoughts I have on this watch. And now let's take a closer look at the Seiko SKX watch. Now I don't have the box the watch came in, so let's just jump into the dimensions. The diameter of the watch is 42 millimeters, the thickness of the watch is 13.7 millimeters, the lug to lug distance is 45.7 millimeters, and the lug width is 22 millimeters. Now the case of the watch is of course made out of 316L stainless steel, as is to be expected, with a mix of brushed and polished finishing. Where you have polished finishing on the sides, well, at least we used to have it because it's pretty scratched up, and we have brushing at the top, and we have circular brushing, so it goes around the case, it doesn't go down, it's not vertical brushing. The crown is at the 4 o'clock position. It's a screw down crown protected by these crown guards. Unfortunately, the crown is not signed, so we don't have any decoration on the crown. What does it mean when a crown is screwed down? Well, you have to unscrew it in order to be able to use the watch. And once you set the watch to your liking, you can screw the crown back in order to achieve maximum water resistance. And the officially declared water resistance for this watch is 200 meters. What does that mean? Well, you can go diving, swimming, you can wash your hands, you can shower with this watch. As long as the crown is properly screwed down, you have no problems with water at all. So it's a true dive watch. And as every true dive watch, it has to have a diving bezel, and it does. It's an aluminum diver's bezel. As you can see, it's pretty scratched up, so a ceramic bezel would not really get scratched up this way. It's a unidirectional 120 click bezel, and let's hear how that sounds. So we've definitely had better bezel action on this channel. Also, it has some backplate, and of course the bezel does not really line up with the rest of the watch. It is a staple of the Seiko SKX line. Now, protecting the dial of the watch is a piece of Seiko's Hardlex crystal. When it comes to scratch resistance, Hardlex is somewhere between mineral and sapphire crystal, so it offers a fairly decent level of protection against scratches. Also, what's an added protection against scratches is the fact that it's not a raised crystal. It's in fact a bit under the bezel, so I think it's not going to be as easy to scratch the crystal of this watch. And while we're here, let's talk a bit more about the dial, which is protected by the Hardlex crystal. So it is a matte black dial. As you can see, it's a very nice little matte black dial. Our markers are printed. We have a triangle at the 12 o'clock position, rectangles at the 6 and 9 o'clock position, and circular hour markers everywhere else, except for the 3 o'clock position where we have the date complication. Minute markers are printed, and they are on the chapter ring going all around the dial. Below the 6 o'clock position, we have the text Seiko Automatic, and above the 6 o'clock position in orange, we have Divers 200M. The orange actually looks very nice here. It provides great contrast with the mostly black and white combo. Also, at the 6 o'clock position, we have 7S26, which is the designation of the movement, which is inside this watch, but about the movement just a little bit later. Also, because this is a dive watch, we have a lume on it, and the lume is applied on the lume pip on the bezel. We have lume on the hour markers, on the seconds hand, minute hand, and hour hand, and it is Seiko's in-house Lumi Bright lume. It is wonderful illumination. If it charges up with sunlight, it will last you throughout the night. It glows very well, especially considering this watch is fairly old. I think this is from 2001 or 2002, if I'm not mistaken, and it still glows very nicely. So good job, Seiko. You truly do make great lume. Now, as we can see, the seconds hand is going smoothly across the dial. It's not going tick tock, tick tock. Of course, that is an indication this is in fact a mechanical movement, and it is the automatic in-house Seiko 7S26 movement. Now this movement beats at 21,600 beats per hour. It has 21 jewels, 41 hours of power reserve when fully wound, and it doesn't have hacking or hand winding. So you might think to yourself, well, how do I power up this watch? Simply just do this. You do the Seiko Shuffle, and because it has the magic lever system, it will quickly start your movement, start your watch. You will quickly see the second hand start ticking. Now, unfortunately, we can't really see the movement. I mean, it's not really a special movement, it doesn't look that good, but I still like to see the movement in a mechanical watch. We have a solid case back, and on the case back, as you can see, we have this wave here, this stylized tsunami wave. Now, a lot of people, including myself, used to think this is the Kanagawa wave. However, based on my research, this is just a stylized tsunami wave, something that Seiko used to use on their divers for quite a while. This has nothing to do with the Kanagawa wave. I have some additional information on the case back if my camera will focus. So it says stainless steel. Also, let's see on this side, it says 7S26 scuba divers. We have probably the reference number on the 6 o'clock, and it says Seiko. I like the case back, it's pretty nice. However, again, I would still prefer a see-through case back. It's just something I prefer myself. So that's more or less it with regards to the watch. Let's talk about the bracelet and the clasp of it. So I originally thought this was the original bracelet that comes with the watch. However, I asked around in some Facebook groups and I got comments on my Serbian review of this watch, and people told me this is not the original bracelet. So this bracelet is a hollow and link bracelet. However, if I understand correctly, the original Seiko SKX bracelet had solid links and hollow end links. So I'm not really going to pay too much attention to the bracelet, but the clasp is original. It's a stamped metal Seiko clasp. We have the Seiko logo here. How you open it, you pull this part up, you pull this part up, and you get the horrible pressed metal clasp, something which is in the rank of more or less all Seiko 5 watches from the early 2000s. But what is cool is that we have 5 positions of micro adjustment, so that means you're gonna probably adjust the watch to your wrist very easily. You close it by just clicking this part and clicking this part, and that's pretty much it. Now, let me show you how to set the watch. So you first have to unscrew the crown completely to get into the default position. And you can't really do much here because it doesn't have hand winding, so you can just spin this around all day, nothing will happen. When we pull the crown out to the first position, we can set the day and date. If we rotate the crown downwards, we can set our day. And of course, as with most Seiko watches with 7S26 movement, we have 2 languages for day. Depending on the region, it can be Italian, German, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, etc. And when we rotate the crown upwards, we can change the date. When you pull the crown to the second position, you can see the second hand is still moving, so it doesn't hack, and you can set the time on the watch. When you're done setting the time, you just put it back to the default position, screw the crown down to get maximum water resistance, and that's it. And finally, I just want to show you how this watch looks on my wrist, so you can get a reference point if you're interested in buying this particular model. I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, and this is how this watch looks on my wrist. I think it looks fine. I think it looks pretty good, considering this is a slightly larger watch, at least when it comes to my taste. Because of the short leg plug distance, I think it works well even on my less than average size wrist. And that's pretty much it. So now let's go back to the original perspective, talk about the pros and cons, and a bit more thoughts about this model. And we're back, so that was the Seiko SKX close-up, a pretty cool little dive watch in my opinion. And now we come to the part of the video where we talk about the pros and cons of a watch. And in my opinion, I think the Seiko SKX still has a couple of pros to offer. Starting with the brand, I think the brand is one of the more obvious pros of this watch because we are talking about Seiko, a brand which has a lot of history, a lot of innovation in the wristwatch world. It single-handedly started the quartz crisis and made a couple of Swiss watch brands go bankrupt, so I think having a Seiko on your wrist is definitely a pro. Next pro, I think, is the movement. Even though the 7S26 movement is a bit more old-fashioned, it doesn't have like hacking and hand winding, I still think it offers a lot because it's an easily serviceable movement. You can easily find the parts. Every semi-competent watchmaker will be able to service this movement for a fairly low price. Also, it's a workhorse movement, it's fairly reliable, it's time-tested, so the 7S26 movement is a pro of this watch in my opinion. Next is the size. So
I personally like smaller watches. I like them 38 millimeters and below. But even though this watch is 42 millimeters, it has a short lug-to-lug distance. And what does that mean? It means it fits most wrists. Now, I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, and I think this watch still fits me quite well. So the size is pretty good. Also consider that this is a dive watch. They're supposed to be bigger because then they are more legible. Now, lume is also a pro because the Lumi Bright on this watch is excellent. It lasts you the whole night. It glows very well, especially considering this watch is kind of old at this point. It still has very good lume. So lume is definitely a pro of the Seiko SKX. And the final pro, I would say, is the water resistance. As long as you screw down the crown properly, you have no problems with water. You can go diving, swimming, whatever you want to do with this watch. Just be careful, make sure the crown is screwed down properly. And those are all the pros. But as every watch, this watch also has a couple of cons. The first one being the backplate on the bezel. I really dislike backplate. It's not as bad as some other watches I had on this channel, but still, backplate should be listed as a con. It just should not be acceptable. Next is that the bezel does not line with the rest of the dial. Of course, this is a common con of Seiko watches, but still, even though it's common, it should not be accepted. It's not like a quirky little thing with Seiko watches. It's just bad quality control. You should never accept that. It is a con of this watch. And the final con, of course, is the clasp and the bracelet of the watch. Now, even though it is not an original bracelet on this watch, the original bracelet has solid links, but still hollow end links, and the clasp is original. It's a very bad stamped metal clasp. It's just bad. So as always, please find a replacement band, replacement strap, whatever. The original one is just really bad. And those are all the cons of the watch. And now, usually in my reviews, I list the pros and cons, and then we come to the conclusion, is the watch worth a buy or not? However, as in my Tag Heuer Formula 1 review, we need to look at this watch from two perspectives. The perspective number one is when this watch came out in 1996, or maybe a bit later. Let's pretend it's like 2002. And is this watch worth it in 2002? And is this watch worth it in 2023? Now, in 2002, TGV never reviewed this watch and made it very popular. It was still in production, and you didn't have competition from micro brands and like brands from AliExpress like San Martin on my wrist. Back then, you can find this watch for like $150 brand new. And in my opinion, if this was 2002 and if we had these things in mind, this would be a best buy watch because you get a mechanical movement, you get a dive watch which is ISO certified with an amazing brand behind it for very low amount of money. And I think then I would say go for it, buy it, you will not be disappointed. However, it's not 2002, it's 2023. And in 2023, this watch is no longer in production. And what happens because it's not in production? Their prices go up, and they go up to silly amounts at this point. You cannot find a new Seiko SKX for below $300. Used models are even more expensive, which is just ridiculous. Now, you can find used models for below $300, but they're usually in bad shape. I found ads for like $500–600 for a used Seiko SKX, and that is just absurd. In my opinion, if we're looking at specs alone, it is absolutely not worth it to buy this watch in 2023, be it new or used. Why? Essentially, what the Seiko SKX is an ISO certified Seiko 5 watch. And if old Seiko 5 watches go for like $30–40, why would this one go for $500? The ISO certification is not really that worth it. And by the way, the ISO certification for this watch is no longer in force, so this watch today would not be able to be ISO certified. It's just not worth it specs alone. But, and that's a big but, it's not just about the specifications in our hobby. More often than not, there is not really that much rational thinking behind buying a watch. It's more of an emotional decision. If we're taking into consideration emotions and the status of this watch, then I can understand why some people are willing to pay a premium, because this is a cult watch at this point. A lot of people want to have it in their collection just because it's a Seiko SKX. And the Omega Moon swatch proved something. It said rational thinking goes out to water when you have a cult design, because the Moon swatch, in my opinion, is not even worth it for like $50. Now, if we're looking at specs alone, I would say Seiko SKX, buy it for $100 tops. But if we're taking into consideration the emotional side of this, I can understand it if some people want to spend $300 $350, but I would not go above that. In fact, I would say be patient, wait, do your research, and I'm sure you can find the Seiko SKX for like $200. Just keep a lookout. I'm sure if you're patient, one will eventually come up. Now, to conclude this video, is this watch ultimately worth it in 2023? If you're like me, if you're more interested in the specifications in value for money, then no, it is not worth it. But if you are looking for that cult model, if you want to enter into a cult collection, then I think the Seiko SKX is a very good way to start, because more other cult watches cost more, and this is one of the cheaper ways to enter into that segment of watch collecting. So if you want to buy a cult classic watch, yes, it's worth it for like $350 maximum. If you're looking at price value proposition, absolutely not worth it unless you can find this watch for like $90 or $100 tops. And that's pretty much it. Those are my opinions on the Seiko SKX. They're kind of divided because I can understand both sides, and I think both sides are correct and both incorrect at the same time. Now, I want to hear your opinion, so please leave your opinion about the Seiko SKX in the comments down below. Now, if you like this video, of course, leave a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, leave a thumbs down, and maybe give me some suggestions on how I can improve my content. Subscribe if you want to see more wristwatch or fragrance related videos. And until next time, guys, have a great day and bye.